Hello and welcome to the session. So let's continue our journey and let's try to understand object-oriented programming in Java. So we will see and we will understand what is a class, what is an object, how to declare and initialize an object, what is the lifespan of an object, uh, object-oriented programming language, a small definition. Of course, we will do hands-on practice and we will continue hands-on practice for other topics like some ready-made classes, how to reuse those, exception handling, wrapper classes, and so on. So let's get started. So what is a class? So before getting into the definition, let's see this kind of a sketches. So we have sketches for three different types of entities, and those represent something, but it is just on paper. It is something which is logical. Okay, so what is a class? So it is a blueprint of something. So if you see, this is kind of a blueprint of different types of entities. So technically speaking, it is a way to put together few variables and related functionality. So when you are doing a programming of you want to implement some functionality or reuse some functionality and so on. So it is basically you define a class and you put together few variables and related functionality and achieve the desired thing. What is a class? It is a structure to hold attributes and methods. So this is a bit technical. Uh, so whenever you define a class, we have seen in earlier demo example, so we can have some kind of an attribute and methods or functionality. We will also see with these real examples here. It is a prototype from which object is created. So if you see, these are kind of prototypes from which we can create an object. It is something which does not exist. This is important. A class is basically something which is logical. It does not exist. It is just a blueprint of something. Okay, so what is an object? It is an instance of the class. Okay, so let's see, let's try to correlate this. So if you see, we have seen in the last slide, so these are just the sketches here, and if you see, these are the real world entity. Okay, or technically it is called as an instance of the class, something which exists, something which is already there. You can see, you can touch, you can feel, that is of course physical, but in the programming concept it is something which exists. Okay, so it is a real world entity derived from a class, something which exists. Okay, you can see something which exists. It has states and behavior, right? So it has some states and behavior, so we will see that in the subsequent slides. Like, right, so let's see what is a class. So let's say there's a class called as mobile. So what are the attributes? It has color, shape, weight, and battery, and it has some kind of a functionality or also called as methods. So we have digital zooming, we have automatic flash on and off, we have face detection. So this is basically the real world implementation. So if you see, object is an iPhone 9 which has color, which has shape, weight, battery, and other features. So it has some kind of a zooming functionality and so on. Let's see another example. So home, if you see, this is a sketch and this is something which exists. Okay, so of course home will have some attributes and it will have some functionality here. So similarly we can have an object. Okay, what about car? So car also has some kind of attributes and car has some kind of a functionality. So this is the real world entity. So this is just the declaration or definition, and this is the implementation of the object, right? So let us see with an example first. So let us say this is a mobile class. So in earlier sessions, we have seen how to create a class. So uh, this is a class and it has some kind of a attribute here, some kind of a variable. It has the functionality called as capture photo, right? Let's see the car class. So car class has this um, attribute or uh, data, and these are the different methods. So you can have increase speed, decrease speed. So it is basically called as a functionality. What is a bank class? So bank class also has a variable here. Let's say your bank balance, and bank class has some kind of a functionality. So add money, deduct money, and so on. Right. So now let us see the next. So what is object oriented programming? So it is a programming paradigm based on the concept of objects which can contain data and functionality. So we have seen that in the car class or mobile class or in the home class, we have some kind of an data and some functionality. So what is data? Data in the form of fields, often known as attributes or properties. So data will hold some kind of an attribute or a property. Let's say car color or mobile weight and so on. Functionality in the form of procedures, often known as methods. So functionality is something which an object can do. Okay, so car, it can increase the speed, decrease the speed. Uh, Mobile, it can take photo, all those things. So what is object oriented programming? It is all about programmer dealing with creating classes, creating instance of the class or objects, playing with data and methods. Right, so let us see what is variable and functionality. So a variable or data is an entity which holds value, right? So car color, so it will hold some value, let's say black, white, red. We will see an example also. Functionality or a method is an entity who does an operation. Okay, who does an operation basically on some local variables or data or anything of that sort. How to use and call the methods, that also we will see. Return statement, right? So let us see once again the same example. So mobile, if you see here, mobile class has a variable called as, let's say, mobile number, and this is the functionality. So how to use that attributes and methods. So in order to use the attributes and methods in the class, you need to create an instance of the class. So if you see the left hand side here, mobile iPhone, so that is how you create a variable of the class. And right hand side, with this keyword called as new and this bracket and your class name here. So this is how you create an object of the class. So there is left hand side, there is right hand side, right? If you see here in the car class, so car, Ferrari, so this is basically class name, this is your object name, and this is your actual object of the class. So left hand side and right hand side. Left hand side is variable of the car class and right hand side is new and object of the car class. So how to create an object? You have to use new keyword. Same thing for bank. So you have variable of the bank class is equal to new object of the blank class. Okay, so how do we declare method? So we have this kind of a signature that you have to use the access modifier and return type and method name, brackets, and you have this body. We will also see this in bit detail also. So each method has some kind of a functionality. So let us see this car class. So car class, if we have, let's see, this is an object called as Ferrari, and it has this method. So for increase method, increase speed, decrease speed, and set hands-free mode. So how do you call a method, or how do you invoke a functionality in the class? You have to say object name dot the method name. So object name dot increase speed. So this is your method. So this will be called, this functionality or subroutine will be called decrease speed and set hands-free mode. So if you see in this method, this is a method which here there are no arguments are passed. If you see in this method, there are some arguments are passed. So this is basically data passing in the method. So you can pass some variable or some objects in a method, do some operation and come out of the method. Okay, let us see in the bank class. So in the bank class, if you see, it has called add money, deduct money, two methods, and ct dot get balance. And if you see, get balance is basically returning an integer. So now let us see what is a return statement. So when any method does some kind of a functionality, we might expect some output from that method. So let's say we are we are adding two integers. So after adding two integers, we want to know the output in another variable. So that is basically the method is returning some value to the earlier functionality or earlier place. That can be done using something called as a return statement. So when a method returns something, you have to use this return statement, and you have to provide what is the return type of the method. So in this case, the return type is integer. If you see these two methods, the return type is void. Void means nothing. That means the method does some kind of an operation, but it does not return anything. So if it does not return anything, you have to say it is returning void. Let us see this employee class. So this class has some kind of a variable. If you see, these are called as instance variable. We will see what is a static variable in a bit, and this is having a some kind of a functionality. Let's say calculate bonus for the employee. Now if you see here, it is passing two arguments. One is an integer, one is a string, and it is taking a return as an integer. Right. So now that brings us to the uh, this question. So is return type mandatory? As we have seen, mentioning the return type is mandatory, but return statement is not mandatory. Right. Now what is method signature? So method signature, let's say for example this method. Okay, this is called as a method signature. So method signature will tell the user that what is that functionality doing, what is the input for that functionality, and what is the expected output from that functionality. So and also access modifier. Now access modifier, we have a separate session on access modifier, so let's continue the discussion for access modifier in another session. But remember, we need to have some kind of an access modifier at the beginning. So there are a couple of other access modifiers, for example public, private, protected, and default. We'll discuss that later. Now after access modifier, you need to specify what is the return type of the method, then your method name, and whether the method takes any kind of an argument, and so on. Now what is main method and why it is important, and is it mandatory? Now this may be an interview question for entry level programmers. So a general answer for this is, whenever you write a Java program, uh, your program will compile and it will run, but then from which point to start running, you have to tell this to your JVM, that start this program running from so and so place or so and so line number. So what is this main method? So when your class has main method, your program will start execution from this main method. Let's see. So your main method is this public static void main string array and arguments. So what happens is, whenever the JVM, your Java virtual machine, takes this class to run, it will go and it will find this method in your class. Whether if your class has this method, then only you can run this class. Okay. So for normal programming, for day-to-day programming, we need to have a main class and all. Uh, and this is how is the signature of the class. So public static void main. So if you see here, access modifier, the type of the method, whether it is static or non-static, what is static, what is final, we have a separate discussion on that. Return type, name of the method is small main, and it will take this argument as a string array. So this is the signature of the method which JVM knows to start with. So that is how it will run this particular class. Okay. So is it mandatory? Is it important? Why is it important? It is important so that the program will start execution. Okay. So to start the execution of the Java class, you need to have main method. Is it mandatory? So uh, let's see. Let me go to this mobile class, and what I will do, I will just remove this. Right. So if you see, the compilation wise, the program or the JVM is not giving any error. Let me just try to run it. So how do I run it? Right click and run. So if you see, if I have the main method, let's see this example. So this has main method. So if I want to run this, right click, and you see I have a run option here. But if you see here in this class, there is no run option. Why? Because there is no main method. Fine. But the question is it mandatory? So main method is absolutely not mandatory. You can have a class without main method also. But then what is the use of the class which doesn't have any main method? So what happens is, whenever you start in a project, your project will have multiple classes. So you don't want to run all the classes separately. So what will happen is, you have a starter class or a base class from where you want to start execution. So only in that class you need to have main method. Other classes you don't want to have main method, and this class, your current class, will be using other classes. So the class which is going to start should have main method. the class which is a supporting class, or it is implementing some kind of a limited functionality, that may not have main method. Remember, if your class does not have main method, you cannot run that class. It will be reutilized in some other classes, right? Can we have a method name which is exactly same as the class name? Okay, let's try this. So I have a class called as mobile. So let me declare a method. So how do you declare a method? You need to have access modifier, public, and then return type. Let's say I will say void, and the class name is mobile, and I'm not taking any argument, and I'm just having an empty body. So I can have a method which is exactly same as class name. But then what is the use of it, and why do we need this kind of things? So this is basically called as a constructor, and we will see in a separate topic what is a constructor and what is the advantage of using a constructor and so on. Right. So now let us see what are the types of the variables. So we have seen earlier, we have seen like a primitive data type. So we have integer, float, string. So that is one definition, one way to define a variable. But in our context, what are the types of variables? So we have three types of variable. We have local variable, we have instance variable, and we have class variable. So local variable, as it says, it's a local. So it is basically used or declared and utilized inside a method. So if you see, this is a method, this is a method. So inside this method, if I'm using a variable, it is called as a local variable. So another way to say local variable is it is declared inside a method and it is accessible only within this method. Outside this method, you do not have access to this method called as count. If you see here, this number variable, so this number variable will be only local to this method, okay, main method. If you see this car class, right, so hands free mode, so this variable is only accessible within this method, okay, it is not accessible outside this method. That is why it is called as a local variable. Instance variable, it is inside the class but outside the method. So let us see some example. Instance variable, right, so if you see this int balance, so this variable balance is not inside any method, okay, but it is inside this class. So that is called as an instance variable. It is inside the class, but outside all the methods. Okay. What is a class variable? It is inside the class, but outside method. Okay. But there is a special type to this, how the accessing class variable. If you see in this example, employee class. So these are the instance variable. Instance variable is inside the class, but outside all the methods. This is called as a static variable or class variable. So what is the difference? So static variable is basically accessible by class name, and instance variable is basically accessible by object name. To access the instance variable, you have to create an object. To access the static variable, you no need to create an object. Okay, so accessibility and scoping, so we have seen that those are accessible inside a method or inside a class and so on. Scoping, so we have seen that the scope of local variable is only inside the method, right? So let us see other topics, non-access modifier for a variable in the upcoming session. Thank you.